6. Jeff, next slide, please.
All right, now I just got to get back to that screen.
Oh, shoot, sorry.
All right, there we go.
All right, and so we are on week 5 of our discussion schedule, which I call the leftovers week. All the stuff we didn't cover before, all the random bits and pieces. And so we'll take it from there. Next slide, please, Jeff, for the agenda. This is the running order for today. I'll start with Swati. She was not able to join us last week, so we will get her Restore Strategies presentation this week. Atul was also not able to join us. Is he on the call yet? I have not.
I don't see him.
Okay. Shoot. Okay, he was sick last week, so we'll see. Svatka, we'll just hear what you have to say. I know you don't have a slide deck prepared, but just anything you can share on that. And then we'll have Surabhi, Nicole, Terry, Jeff, and Waruna. That will be the core presentations. And then next slide, please. Time permitting, we'll get into some demos and maybe do some Q&A and flashcards. Okay, and so without further ado, Swati, we'll bring it over to you for Restore Strategies.
Sure.
And then Jeff, if you can, I don't know that we'll need the main slide deck back anymore, Jeff, so you can unshare until you're up.
Okay, can you guys hear me and also see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So I was not able to attend last week, and sorry for that. But I'll just go over the presentation which I have. I know we discussed data backup last week, and we also touched on Restore. But let me go through what I have, and then we can discuss further. So since all of us deal with a lot of data in our projects, and I'm sure at some point we have messed it up or someone else has, and we have had to restore the Salesforce data using either data loader or just in general the CSVs. Normally in my projects, at least I try to have like the weekly data export directly from Salesforce or bi-weekly, depending on the number of changes happening in that org. And I'm able to restore the data in the form of CSVs. So the most common method of restoring data is the first one, which is mentioned here, where we either manually...
Swati, sorry to interrupt, but I don't see a presentation on the screen. I see a screen that says you're presenting to everyone, and I'm pretty sure that's your screen, but maybe you shared a different window?
Let me
Or you're not sharing the presentation?
Let me share again.
The joys of technology.
Yeah.
There we go.
Cool. Awesome. I think I just shared that window probably. So cool. So going back to what I was saying, the first option which we generally use most frequently is manually restoring the data in Salesforce. The backup method generally generates the data in the form of CSVs, which we can use to restore the data either using data loader or the import wizard. It's important to note in this case the sequence in which we are actually reloading or restoring the data, because we have to, if the data is accidentally deleted, we have to restore the parent data first, pick those IDs, and then bring it back onto the child records as reference, unless we're using an external ID or something. But in general, this process is kind of painful if you have too many data hierarchies and complex relationships going on, but the cheapest in terms of pricing. So that's the first one. The second one is I'm taking the help of Salesforce. I think it's called the Salesforce Data Recovery Service, which I'm not sure if anyone has used here. I have not. But we can cover more details in the later slides. This generally is the last restore option if we do not have any other ways of restoring the data, and there is a large amount of data which we have lost. And there is a third option of actually using third-party tools. These are more, and the options, there are several tools for just backup, and there are tools which I was going through which have backup and restore, but they are more kind of data integration approaches where you have like a sync going on between your Salesforce org and the tool. I was seeing one particular example called Backup for Salesforce, which apparently helps in like point in time restore. There is obviously a pricing related to it, but there is backup of data and metadata, and there is a restore of either the whole org or just partial restore in terms of some objects and some fields, if you like. So I haven't used that either. So I've just gone through this more safe projects, I guess, where we did not really do much with the data. Okay, so the data restore, I was generally using the manual methods, going through data loader and CSVs. There are some good tips mentioned on the Salesforce documentation, which I just thought it's a good idea to go through. The first one is minimizing the transformation on audit fields, which are the system fields like created date, last modified date, etc. So there
Swati, if you're there, we can't hear you.
Hello?
There you are. You're back.
Oh, how long was I gone?
Just not very long.
Okay. Should I just start from this slide then?
Yeah, you're actually just talking about the first point.
Okay, cool. I'm sorry, my internet must be shaky. So I'll just let me know if you guys lose me again.
Okay.
So the first one, as I was saying, is while we are restoring the data manually, there are some helpful tips which we can use. First one is the minimizing the transformation on the audit fields, which are the system fields like the created date, the last modified date, etc. There is a feature which I was mentioning, and this feature, create audit fields, as mentioned, was enabled after Winter 16 or from Winter 16. And this feature can be used to actually restore the system fields as to what they were. If during creating those records. So this does not work if you're trying to update existing records, but if you are inserting records, we can use this feature to just default or place a particular value on the system fields, which normally is not allowed. And this is a specific permission on the profile which can be used. The second one is transformation on auto numbers, where the helpful tip was, because auto numbers are also system generated, and if we lose the data on those auto number fields, there is a tip which we can use of converting the auto number to text fields and switching back to what exact values they were during the restore, and then changing it back to auto number if we don't want to lose those particular numbers, or if they are being used like a reference in an external system. So that's one of the things that you can do. In general, the third and the fourth tip here is minimizing any transformation generated by workflows, triggers, and validation rules. Generally, what I have tried to do in my projects is to make the updates directly in my CSV if I'm trying to restore the data, and not having to fire the workflow and triggers onto those data again after we insert it. So it's like a more direct process where you just insert the right data and the updated data, which your workflow might update later. So instead of that firing, you just create the perfect data with respect to data quality and any updates which happens in the backend normally. So that's 3 and 4. And just the tip 5 is to be aware of any changes which has happened in your metadata when between your actual backup and restore. So if there was any particular field, for example, which was inserted between the backup and restore, you'll not be able to restore that data because it was not there in your backup. Just so being cognizant of that. Going to the more expensive service, which is a Salesforce data recovery service, is the last resort when we do not have any other options to restore our data. It is a costly process, and the price is a flat rate of $10,000. But the interesting thing is that Salesforce can provide the backup of all your data in the form of CSVs, although it's still your responsibility to insert that data either manually and going through that painful process again of CSVs, or hiring any professional services or any, I'm not sure if there are any app exchange tools which can help for the same. But so the, I mean, I again, like I said, I haven't gone through this process ever, but it's definitely a costly process, and we would not really like to come to this. Just as a thing which I noticed was that the data can only be recovered to up to 3 months of the past 3 months of whatever it was of the current date. So that's about Salesforce Data Recovery Service. And going on to the next one, there were some additional data restore considerations which I was going through. In case
Swati, we're losing you again.
Did you hear me on the last one? Last slide?
You're back again. It was only like 30 seconds that we lost. So I think you're good to keep going.
Okay. So yeah, the last I was discussing was the Salesforce Data Recovery Services. And there are some additional restore considerations which I found were helpful. And that's what I'm sharing now. The related through a master detail relationship, and accidentally, if we delete the master, we know that the child records are also deleted. But if we are able to restore the data from recycle bin, and if we can restore the parent records, we'll get the child records back again along with the parent records, because there was a cascade deletion which happened. We can restore it in the same way. And an additional thing is that if it was a cascade delete, you'll not find the child records in the recycle bin. So the only way to do that is restoring the parent records, and we can get the child records again. The second one is all recreated records will have a new unique record ID. So like I said, when we are manually restoring the data, and if there are relationships which we need to take care of, we need to go through the parent record first and take those newly generated IDs and use them as the lookups if you are also generating or inserting the child records. Well, using the normal VLOOKUP function, I'm sure we have done that, replacing those IDs in CSVs. But there was an additional tip of using a custom external ID field. And if we can use that to actually store the prior record IDs and use the same field to actually link your child records to the parent records when you are re-importing. So that is also another way of doing it. And the last one is, as I mentioned, if we want to restore the system fields for created date, the last modified date, and created by IDs and these system fields, we can use this feature called create audit fields. Hello?
Yeah, you're there.
What I did? Okay. Okay. So yeah, we can just use this feature to update those fields when we are trying to recreate the records with their original values. So that's all I have for this presentation. But I would really like to know from everyone else, because I have not used the Salesforce Data Recovery Services or any other third-party tools to actually use the backup and restore. Has anyone used either of these options in their projects and just can tell me how the experience has been?
I have some, Swati. So this is Svatka.
Hey.
So I think I have one for you, which is more of a use case of the backing up from a recycle bin. And I think someone has a demo for DBM, not DBM, but the demand tools for like data merges. So I have seen customers where they would be doing record merges and then they would say, oh, we lost like an account.
Right.
If you go in a cycle and you restore the account, very much so you're not going to find related like activities and contacts and all the others. That is the downfall. I have used Salesforce data recovery maybe 10 years back. One thing that's it, but it doesn't mean that at least at that time it was not very speedy. They have to go through a lot of tapes, right, or whatever the backup machines they have today. The vehicles. So I would say yes, the data is there, but it might still take them time to find your data that you're trying to recover, right? So yes, there's a cost, but I would say there might be still a time to, time to account in how quickly you're gonna get this data. So maybe that's why majority of my customers, my enterprise customers I've seen, they have utilized their own backup strategies. And one of them is an app exchange tool called DBM. And DBM is connected directly to SQL Server only. So depending on what type of a data store you have, you could configure DBM to do your backups and bring them, so you had them in-house. So like I said, majority of my customers were using those choices. That said, in nonprofit world, you will still probably see quite a lot of the, let me go and schedule my weekly backup, get my CSVs and maybe store them somewhere, So that's my experience.
Atul just joined us. Atul, we were talking about if whether anyone has used the Salesforce's restore service before or any other available app exchange tools for restores. I don't know if you've had any experience with those.
Hey guys, yeah, Natalya, not yet. I haven't used any restore service till now.
Okay. Kind of shocking that they charge you $10,000 and that doesn't even include actually putting your data back.
Yes, that was the most interesting part for me because, that effort is still mine. Okay, I would rather go for a better backup solution then. But thanks, Swarka, for just explaining your experience there. I was just wondering while actually going through this, because an internal solution makes more sense for like the bigger customers than actually going for the service, because we always try to have like a more comprehensive solution and not go for the last resort. I think that makes sense to have like an internal backup solution, or if any external tool actually helps in that. Cool.
Yeah, slightly off topic, but when it comes to restoring things, we ran into a situation where we deleted a sandbox and it turned out it wasn't supposed to be deleted and there was critical data in there that hadn't been backed up anywhere else. It was metadata, obviously. And Salesforce can actually restore a deleted sandbox for about 3 days after you delete it. So
awesome.
If you ever find yourself in that situation, you have that option. Hopefully you'll never need it.
No, but that's good to know.
So yeah, the person asked me to delete the sandbox. I deleted the sandbox. They said, wait, we need that sandbox. I'm like, well, why'd you ask me to delete it?
So Natalya, was that the refresh? So if we refresh our UAT sandbox, like?
I don't know if they could pull back from a refresh. This was just a delete. I was told we didn't need that sandbox anymore, so I deleted it, and it turned out we actually did need that sandbox still.
Okay, gotcha.
But it would be interesting to know if it worked on a refresh as well.
Yeah, I think it's always like, you'd said, yeah, everything is done. We don't need it anymore. And then, of course, there was something that's left over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never fails. Thank you, Swati.
Sure.
All right. Atul, welcome back. Hope you're feeling better. You're up next, actually, on when and where to use data cleaning and standardization. If you're ready to go. If not, we can skip you and come back after the next presentation.
Hey, Natalya. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm actually feeling pretty good. Natalya, you have to skip me. I think for this week, I'm unfortunately not ready for the presentation this week
Okay.
as well.
All right.
I'm sorry,
right.
guys.
All right, Svatka. I know you don't have a slide deck, but I think you said you were just going to have some talking points. After you unmute yourself, Svatka.
How's my connection right now? I am. Hear me okay?
For me, you're very broken up. I don't know if it's just my connection and if everybody else is hearing you okay.
No, I
Let
also.
me.
Yeah, you're kind of breaking up for me as well.
Okay, I can be at my laptop in about 3 minutes, so I'm gonna change my position and.
Well, you're really clear right now. Just freeze, whatever.
Good. I am not gonna move. Okay. All right. So let's do this thing. All right. So outbound messaging. So I'm gonna go from the practical, like an experience side, as well as some of the academic.
Okay, Svatka, we're losing you again. I think we'd better wait those 3 minutes while you get to your laptop. Surabhi,
All right.
let's move on to you while we're waiting.
Okay. So let me start presenting. Okay, let me know if you guys can see the screen all right.
Yep, we can, and it's so pretty too.
Okay, thank you. It's all Microsoft. They did pretty work. Okay, so my topic today is Lightning Connect. So this was an interesting topic, and I did not know something like this actually exists. So can somebody tell me what happens if you want to integrate with some data source and you cannot store that data source inside Salesforce?
Well, the first thought is you make a lot of call outs using some sort of API, but I'm guessing you have a better answer for us.
Yeah, that's when Lightning Connect comes in. So they say that if you cannot really store that data inside of Salesforce for some regulatory reasons, then there's something called as Lightning Connect, where your external data is exposed in OData format, and then Salesforce can just use them as external objects. So let's dive in. So how does the Lightning Connect work? So it is a real-time access to the external data source. All the access, all the data access is by reference. So we are just, using their external ID that we will use as the external ID in the custom object that we create. But it's not like we are, storing any information inside of Salesforce. Then it also talked about how OData is a standard open data protocol, which was created by Microsoft back in I think I have it in my slide somewhere. Yeah, in 2009. So it's been there for some time. So one of the more important pieces for the OData is actually that the external system that we are connecting to, they should have ability to expose their data sources in OData format. I've not heard about OData format before. Has anybody else used it, or do they, any of their systems have been exposed in a OData format?
That's new to me. I just knew that this somehow magically worked. I didn't know the guts of how it worked.
So one of the things, because this is a standard and more people are starting to, I guess, look at it at least, there are other tools, Jitterbit being one of them, that allows you to hook up like you are normally with an ETL, but rather than hooking the data sources directly, you can expose then what you've connected to as an OData connection. And then so you could hook it up to this. Now, you say, why do you want to do that? And you may cover this a little bit, but actually, I'll let you go first before I cover more. But there are tools now that you can hook up to, let's say, databases, and then turn around and expose it as OData so that you can then connect it through either to Salesforce or some of the others that are utilizing OData.
Yes, absolutely. So the many more partners, I don't know if you're able to see that, but yeah, like Jitterbit is one of them, Dell Boomi, MuleSoft. So it looks like almost any of those middleware solutions can actually help you to expose your data in an OData format. So yeah, I think going forward, I mean, definitely there was one of the quotes from, I think it like that person now works in Salesforce, but he has worked with some big enterprise companies, and he mentioned like his approach always to any kind of integration is like, do not bring more, like if a data resides in some other system, do not again replicate that data inside of Salesforce or any application for that matter. So it's always just better that we do like the process integration, and ideally we never even want to do the data integration. And Heroku is one of the other places that I saw like there was a lot of mobile use cases like around how OData can be more useful. So yeah, I mean, if you have middleware, definitely instead of exposing it as REST data, maybe OData would be a better idea. So this image is from odata.org, and OData is nothing but a protocol for REST, in fact. So it's just the way, you know, we would format a particular, basically our data that we are sending. So yeah, it was founded by Microsoft, and it has been an open standard since 2014, I think. And it kind of shows us that like Salesforce earlier used to use OData 2.0, and now it also supports OData 4.0. So OData 2.0 had a Atom pub format, which was not very friendly. And now it does have the JSON format, which is more friendly, and that we have seen in our previous sessions. So that would be a typical OData format. So how does it work inside of Salesforce? So inside our Salesforce, we would pretty much will be creating an external object, and then we can access those external objects pretty much like custom objects. We can create tabs, we can create custom lookups, like we can link those objects to account or opportunities if needed. And then we can do list views. We can, you know, put them in the community if needed. And we can like create, edit, modify using Apex and also through REST API and SOAP API and all of those things. So this one definitely, you know, it's pretty much like a custom object, but the data is not really inside Salesforce. It's actually residing outside. And I had a demo prepared, but for some reason, my org, like the object is missing, or maybe I'm looking at some other org. So maybe I'll do demo next time.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, so yeah, any questions on the custom object pieces?
So did this
No,
used to be called Salesforce Connect, and now they've rebranded
yes.
it? Connect?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's what it is.
They need to stop changing names.
Everything used to be something else, now has lightning in front of it. So.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it used to be the Salesforce Connect.
Is this,
But this
included
is
with
a pretty-
licenses?
No, you have to purchase per connection.
Yeah,
Okay.
per object, which is really tough, right, Jeff? Am I right? Like, is it like if I have to connect like an account and a contact and an opportunity from another system, I think it is per like use case.
Right, it's per other system, correct. So if you're hooking up to SAP, for instance, they had a connector, you would pay a connection to hook to that, then you could underlying hook as many of those objects as you wanted.
Oh, so it is per system, not per object. Okay.
Not per object. So right now, I actually have this working between two Salesforce instances. I've got Salesforce to Salesforce working in one case, and I've got this working in another. where you actually can expose, let's say, account information from system A into system B. You can create relationships to your own account, do lookups upon that, and I mean, it really acts as though it's sitting in your org. It just happens to be somewhere else. So that's kind of the point earlier, is you don't have to duplicate your data. You can access other forms of data, keep it in its native system, and act on it within Salesforce.
So Jeff, even if you connect to another Salesforce instance, is there additional licenses?
Yes, you still have to pay, because there's the back-end connection going on, and they're assuming that you're probably hooking to somebody else's Salesforce versus your own, so they still charge you, whether it's Salesforce or whether it's another system.
For the Lightning Connect or for the Salesforce to Salesforce connection?
For the Lightning Connect, sorry, for the Salesforce to Salesforce, there is no charge. For Lightning Connect, they have a charge, even if you're hooking to another Salesforce.
Right, but Salesforce to Salesforce doesn't work with Lightning, so I think that's one of the things that I've noticed, that it's only for Classic. And
well, yes and no. You can't set it up, but the underlying objects are still there. The job is running that will still move the data. You just, when you go to configure it, yes, you're going to have to hook over to Classic in order to configure it, or to see the little indicator that that a particular record has. Well, actually, even the indicator that a particular record has gone over, you can build yourself a Lightning connector. Excuse me, a app
component. Yeah.
A component, excuse me. You can build your component to then expose that the way you want it to. So they just didn't give it to us out of the box. That's down the list on their other items. But you could, everything is there, so you can go expose it yourself if you want.
Yeah, that was the one thing, the mystery that I have been looking at too. I'm like, it's an integration. What does it matter on a UI side, you know? Besides, they didn't give us the identifiers of, hey, I'm linking this account to that account, right? And show me that it's synced.
Well, and I've actually talked to the product team of why it's not there. They said, well, we'd really like you to start using Lightning Connect.
Yeah, of course they would.
Well, yeah, because it's a charge, but it's two different cases. I mean, Lightning Connect is really keeping it in the other org, where Salesforce to Salesforce is moving it between the orgs. So
that's right.
It's kind of solving two separate things, but anyway.
And I'm really excited about the Lightning Connect because, you know, just for so many reasons, right? We have customers that have PAI data, like a personal identifiable information that we don't want to move from point A to point B to point C, especially with GDPR and all the other constraints in EMEA and other regions, right? So I think it's a great idea. I agree that I'd rather use that over replication of data. So fundamentally, I like that a lot. I don't necessarily agree with the cost, because that puts us in a, you know, I have customers that have like, you know, 15 different systems they want to connect to Salesforce, but who has 15x, you know, to use that. So that's where we fall short on. It's a great idea, but, you know, and then there's the cost. Yeah.
And to that, I'll also add that it's also the middleware cost, because in the past, when we have considered, like, there was some discussion around considering it, but then, you know, the other system did not, we couldn't even expose that in OData format.
Right, that's probably the biggest hurdle right now, is just how many different things are in an OData format.
So yeah,
so if you have to buy both middleware to put it into OData, and then you have to pay for your connector to hook to it, you're starting to get expensive.
Right, yeah, and people are more like, let's just do an ETL tool at that point, you know.
Yep. Okay. Anything else, Surabhi? Otherwise, we'll move on to Nicole, and then after Nicole, Svadko will come back to you for outbound messaging.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole.
All right. Okay. So I have first I have to present. Hold on. Jumping the gun a little bit here. All right. So you guys can see my screen okay, because it says that I am sharing. I'm going to hide this little guy for right now, and I'm going to move this into presentation mode. So I think I picked like one of the easiest topics to go over today, so I'm pretty excited. And then I also set it up between two dev orgs so that we can kind of walk through a little bit too if you guys want to. So this is Salesforce to Salesforce. So this is your native Salesforce to Salesforce integration that's pretty easy to set up, very declarative friendly. So I would say it's pretty accessible. However, if you're used to doing things fast, it can be kind of annoying. So setting up Salesforce to Salesforce is pretty easy. All you have to do is you go into your setup menu. This is in Classic, as somebody mentioned earlier. So you go into your setup menu, you type in Salesforce to Salesforce. There's this little enable toggle box, like everything in Salesforce. Just check the box to enable it, and you get the additional objects and tabs and setting options that are available to you. You can't disable it once it's enabled, but you can always remove your connections. So if you want to play with it in the developer org, there's nothing wrong with enabling it. You're not losing anything. You're not risking anything. You manage connections. Permission is required for any user that you want to manage the connections between the multiple Salesforce orgs. So you could do that through a permission set, or you can modify the profile, or however you want to do that. Both the source org and the target org have to have Salesforce to Salesforce enabled in order for this to work. So that's just something to keep in mind. It makes it really easy if you're passing information from two Salesforce orgs where you're the admin, because you can manage that. But if you're not the admin in both orgs, or if you don't have access to both orgs, you may want to just kind of work closely with the other person that you're setting up this connection with. But I think in most use cases, Salesforce to Salesforce is kind of designed for someone who has access to both orgs. So you can customize the invitation email templates and the email addresses under the Salesforce to Salesforce settings and the setup menu. So if you want to customize that in a way that's more friendly to your organization, you can do that. So I can go through the slide deck, or I can jump over to the sample org to show you guys as we're going through this. What would you prefer?
Oh, I'd love to see the demo. I'd love to see it in action.
Okay, so I'll just jump over then. If I can figure out how this goes back. Do I hit escape?
Escape usually works.
Okay, I was afraid I was going to escape out of the recording. I know that doesn't make sense. But, okay, so what I'm going to go here, and this is my source org. So I'm just going to go into setup and go into Salesforce, Salesforce for Salesforce settings. And you can see here that I've enabled it. So before you enable this guy, you'll just have a checkbox. It's blank. You won't have any of your deliverability information. But once you enable it, you have the option to change your from address, your from email name. They have sample invitation emails that you can modify, or you can create your own. So I will show you what that guy looks like once we get to the next part. So that's all you have to do in your target org. And then I also have a source org set up here as well. So you can see, and of course I don't have Forts.com Navigator set up in either of these Chrome browsers, so I'm having to do things the hard way. But you can see here that we've set it up as well. And I'm the system administrator, so I do have the manage connections permission, but that's just something that you would give through a permission set, or through your profile. All right. So once you have enabled Salesforce to Salesforce, you would want to add a connection, of course, because that's why you set it up. So you're going to add a contact for your target org as well as the company as an account in contacting your source org. And once they're set up as a contact, under the connections tab, you can create a new connection and identify the contact and the account for your target org. You'll identify your connection owner. So this is going to be the person that receives any error emails for the connections, and is also the default owner for any new records that come through the connection. And then you hit the save and send invite button, which will send an email with the link for the target org to the contact for your source org. And then when they get it, they just click the accept to establish the connection. So that's a lot of words. Let's look at what it actually looks like when you're in it. So if we go here, that is the wrong org. So here we have this connections tab. Once you enable Salesforce to Salesforce, and if you don't have it, you can always just click your plus and grab your connections. So when we want to create a connection, you can see here that I created an account for my other developer org, and I just added myself as a contact. So I added my email address so that I would get the email for the invite. And then you just create a new connection. And you could say, okay, I want to select this contact, and it grabs the account and it says the connection owner is going to be me. So this is the user within my instance, not within the target's instance. So that anything that comes through this connection is going to be defaulted to me. And then if there's any issues with mappings or anything like that, or like pick list values or something of that nature, you can identify those and address those here. You also have the option to set up templates, and if you have a lot of connections that you're going to be doing and you want to use similar templates back and forth. Okay, so once you click this send and send invite, you'll actually get this little email that looks like this. So once you click on this little link here, I'll ask you if you want to accept, and I'm going to say I've already accepted it in my source org, so I think if I do this here, it's going to yell at me. Let's not do that. Let's do, and if I can remember my password, I just had to change it today. Might yell at me. Yeah, so it's yelling at me because I already accepted it. But go back to my connections here. If it'll tell me. Yeah, so it'll just have something like this, but then it'll say, do you want to accept or reject? And you can always deactivate it or anything like that. So this is what it looks like on the other side once you've accepted the link. And then we can go back to publishing objects. So in order to like send an object to the other org, you publish it, and then to accept an object from another org, you subscribe to it. So fairly simple terminology. So publishing objects from the target org, you click the publish button in the connections tab, you select the objects to share, and then you can individually select each field that you want to share. So if we jump back to this org, to go back to our connections tab, you'll see that I can publish or unpublish certain objects. So let's say I want to also publish cases. You can go ahead and do that. And then within your object, you can edit here, and you can select which fields you would like to publish over to the source org. So by default, it's really only going to send over the required fields, I believe. So it just starts with 1. And then you can say, well, I also want to switch, send over the case number and the email address and the name, or however you want to do that. So you can select whichever fields you want to publish over there. And then switching over to the subscribing to objects from the source org, you click subscribe. You select what you want, what objects you want the published objects to map to, so they don't have to be the same. If you had a custom object that you wanted to map the objects that are coming over from another Salesforce instance, if you wanted to map them to a different object, you could do that, as well as you could map different fields. The API names don't have to match. And optionally, you can auto accept all records from a particular connection. So if we were to jump over, sorry, that's the wrong desktop. So over here in our source org, you can see that we can subscribe or unsubscribe to multiple objects. So I have decided to subscribe to account and to contact, and since I just added case, we could say we want to subscribe from cases. So I can auto accept any of these if I want to, which means that I don't have to go through the process of approving those. I'm not going to do that for right now. I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. Well, I can leave it. It doesn't matter. It's okay. And then once you're in here, you can see that we have the option to edit this, similar to how we did this in the publishing. So you just select which account or which field you want to map it to. If you're mapping to a pick list value, you have the option here to select if what their pick list values mean in your org. So you can modify that. So if you had something a little bit more generic, it'd be easy to combine multiple pick list values from a source org into a target org if that was your need. Or if you just use different terminology from one Salesforce org to the other, you can map that pretty easily. You don't have to accept all of the values that are brought over either. And then you also have the option to auto map. So if the API names do match and it's the right data type, it can auto map those fields for you, which can make that a little bit easier. Okay. All right. So caveats with field mappings, that your data types must be the same. You can map your lookups to text values, or to text fields, and auto numbers to text fields. And you cannot publish lookup fields. Instead, they recommend that you create a formula field for the ID and then push the formula field. And I'm assuming that's because it can't maintain the Salesforce ID on the other end. So it recommends using a formula field and then matching your custom objects that way. So I haven't done anything outside of just playing around with it with contacts and accounts, and I haven't had any issues there. So I don't know how much this impacts custom objects and how that kind of goes in play with those two. But I would assume you'd have to do some manual matching there.
Yeah, if you get too in depth into this, you end up sending over like the shared ID fields as an external record, then you set triggers on the objects to go in and recreate those relationships.
Makes sense. It's almost like an external ID where you go and you map it and
exactly
create the relationship. Okay, cool. And then connection overriding. So I kept this in here. So in a one-way sync, the source org will always overwrite the data in the target org every time the so that way, because it's only a one-way connection. So that way the target org always has the most up-to-date information from the source org, regardless of what the target org has written in their environment. But in a two-way sync, the way that I read this is that when they push changes, whenever a change is made to a shared record. So if org A makes a change, it'll push that change to org B. And then when org B changes it, whether it's the same field or a different field, it'll push that change over to org A. Okay. And then I also had for sharing. So there's a couple different ways that you can share records between orgs. So you can manually share those records using the forward to connections button and list views, or sharing the record through the related list on the object. So I can show you that in a second. And then if you're forwarding or if you're sharing a record, you have the option to also share child records. You do have to be the record owner or higher than the record owner in the role hierarchy in order to share a record through a connection. Your target org can auto accept those shared records, or they can accept them through the related list accounts from connections in the on the home page. And then the other option is to programmatically share records, which would be a lot more user-friendly, I think, if you had an established connection. So if you want to programmatically share your records, you can do that through Apex triggers or a batch job, so that you don't have to manually go in here and share every single record that you want to share with your target org. So I can show you how that works as well. If you're on your accounts page, you have the option to select a couple of different environments, and you could say we're going to forward to these connections, and you can select the connection that you want to forward it to, and you can send the notification email if you want as well. So I've already forwarded this connection, and this org doesn't have very many accounts in it. So, but if I wanted to, I could create a new account and forward that as well. You'll also notice that if you click on your account here, you also have an external sharing related list. So if you wanted to forward this account to a connection, you can do that. You can also see which accounts this is currently, or which connections this account is currently shared with, and what the status of that is. So if we go into our environment here, I'm actually going to share this contact as well because I think I turned on auto accept on contacts. I think. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to share this contact really quick with my dev. I don't think I have any cases on there, so that's not going to help. Yeah, I did. Okay, so that has been pending. And now I can go to my target org and I can click on accounts and you can view your accounts from connections. So you go here and you can see everything that I have accepted and I haven't accepted. I have accepted Baptist East. And you can see that it's an account that's externally shared. So this is coming from a Salesforce to Salesforce connection and it's active. But I haven't accepted the Norton Healthcare. And if I go into my contacts, I can see my contacts from my connection that you already went through. So let's find Sylvia. Yep. So Sylvia Perkins is coming over from my other environment as well. If you switch to Lightning Experience, you can see the accounts. So I can see Baptist East, but if I'm looking on my related list, I don't see the external sharing. So I don't know if this is coming from another Salesforce to Salesforce, or it's coming through a Salesforce to Salesforce integration. Same with contact. I can see Sylvia. I just don't know that she's coming from another org from this view. And I also don't have the option to forward a contact or an account to another Salesforce org because I don't have the related list here. And the account tabs are very different. So you would have to do that a different way if you're trying to share through Lightning, which I think was already mentioned. So other than that, it's there. It's just if you're not going to do programmatic sharing, it's a lot of manual clicking. I want to share this one, forward this one, map these fields, things like that. So
I seem to remember Trailhead DX, they said something about you're basically using twice the amount of data to do this. I don't remember the reason, something like every org has to keep track of what it's sent over and what it hasn't sent over, or something like that. Does that ring a bell?
oh, you know, I didn't even check the storage limits, but let's see what is...
Yeah, essentially, you'll have the data in both orgs, and then each org will have that partner network record connection, because both orgs will say, you know, what org it came from, what ID it was in that org, and what ID it is in this org, and then you'll have that in both the target and the sharing. So yeah, there's 2 copies really of everything plus the extra connection table.
Yeah, and I don't know if those count against your storage limit, because I know that Salesforce gives you certain backend objects, like without counting against your limit.
Right. I mean, they're low level. It's got 4 IDs and a, you know, status of whether it's sent or pending or whatever else. So they're not high, you know, high size type things. So
yeah, I'm not seeing them in my storage usage.
Huh.
So I would think that,
unless it's one of those behind the scenes things that it doesn't show you in the data storage, like sharing tables and things like that.
Yeah,
right,
I mean,
or like price book entries, right? Like I remember I had like 12 million rows in one price book entry table object, and they didn't show and they didn't count against limits. So there are some, like Jeff said, like a lower level objects that just don't show up, means don't count. Great, woohoo!
yeah, assets don't count against your storage limits. So, and I learned that in a very interesting way. It was incredibly helpful because I have a client that has over like 5 million assets.
Whew.
And they don't count against their data storage. So,
nice.
So yeah. Yeah, special objects that way, but I don't see it here. I would be interested if it what is it's under monitor. I think system overview. It's like I would assume it's hitting my API request pretty heavily though. So every time you send one, I'm assuming it's just one API call each time, which isn't very efficient.
That's all under the covers though, not our headache.
Yeah. So should be under admin. Yeah. Yeah, partner network. So it's used 9 API calls today with me playing with it. So
cool.
All right. So I will pass it back until the demand tools demo.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, Svatka, we'll try you again.
I am at my computer, so it should be a lot better. Thanks for sticking around. I do not have a presso, but I do have some tidbits that I hope you guys will all find helpful. Outbound messaging, it's configured to work with workflows. So if you know how workflow rules work, which typically work on a change of fields, you can see how you could basically search and listen for a change of an attribute on a record and then send a tickler. I call it a tickler, but it really sends a fully formed SOAP call outside to an external endpoint. And the endpoint could be a web service, right? Now, it is a synchronous call, so it is not real time. And if you just send an outbound message, it will return back once you configure a listener. It will come back and say, okay, hey, I arrived, or at least I was delivered. But that's it. It doesn't do much more than that. Additionally, what's also interesting about outbound messaging is that it will keep retrying for at least a day before it sends a notification, hey, I failed, it didn't work, right? So again, those messages or whatever that change you're trying to send downstream cannot be that critical, because if it's going to take up to a day for me to know that that record failed and it didn't make it to my destination, maybe I should use other vehicles to actually send that message, right? But if it is not mission critical and I can wait a day to hear that it didn't make it, then maybe it is a good way for me to send that notification, hey, something changed on this record, now go and do something else, right? You can configure up to 5 people to receive these notifications. It will retry more than once within the 24-hour period, but as it keeps retrying and failing, it will start stretching that retry to maybe every couple hours. So again, keep that in mind. It's asynchronous. It is not right away. So if you need that information in a downstream system to act on it, probably not the best use case. So in a backend, you just go to setup. It is point and click, which is great. You do need to configure your external endpoint, which again could be web service. You will probably most likely want to secure the transport between the point A and point B. And so it is recommended that, and most likely your destination endpoint web service will require an SSL. So you will probably set up a two-way SSL on that. Then, like I said, you will be probably creating a listener for messages coming back. And the way how today it works, it runs off of workflow rules. It also, I noticed that it's also on approval processes and entitlement processes, which I have not used those two in the past. And I have seen quite a lot of discussions on discussion boards, people requesting that it's built in Process Builder. And so I don't know if that's there yet, if it's on a process, on a roadmap or not. So I'm going to pause right here. Has anyone in the group used outbound messaging?
Wow, nobody's used it. It's a great tool, but workflows suck. I mean, once you start using process builders, like, oh my God, do I have to go to workflow?
Well, that's the thing, right? So that's why I guess people are trying to figure out, why can't I trigger it from other places, right?
Right.
And the whole concept of asynchronous, again, my enterprise customers, they don't want to wait. They don't want to see that one record would fail. And if they have like 20, 30, 1,000 transactions a day, they're not going to wait for a few failed records. So maybe it is not. Maybe it's for smaller business. Maybe it's for information that is not that mission critical. And so maybe the use cases are not, broadly used. That's all I would say on that. And if we are having a meeting next week, maybe I'll come up with some examples for you guys. How that could work.
Okay, that might actually be a good idea for the next meeting, is like just show and tell.
Yeah,
like, hey, I tried to set up this kind of integration and here's how it works.
Or it doesn't.
Yeah, or it doesn't, yeah.
I know, right? I don't think Jeff would be using it in his industry. I mean, can you come up with a use case, Jeff, where you guys would be able to use it in FinServ?
Well, I think anytime you want to just notify another system that something has happened,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's primarily what it's set for. So you're not going to sit around and wait, but you know, you close an opportunity. You might want to notify your back-end system. Hey, you might be getting an opportunity, or notify your delivery team an opportunity just closed. You know, be expecting some stuff coming in. So I think that's kind of the nature of it. Is just, you know, we talked about earlier that fire and forget, but basically you let somebody know something is on its way. You don't care. You don't necessarily care whether they got it or not, because you're not going to wait around for the answer. You know, so.
Yeah, I've used it with several clients as well, and it's almost more letting another system know that hey, this whatever occurred, and frequently then that system is calling back in to grab. It gets a little bit more sophisticated with some of the other integrations after that notification, but that's been my experience with it.
So not to speculate, but would a streaming API be something that may be used more, you know, in a better fashion in that respect, rather than using outbound messaging? Just like, hey, something is happening, I'm gonna keep notifying my my listeners on a different place.
Well, the thing I like about outbound messaging is if you don't have Salesforce developers ready to build actual APIs, it's a great solution for your admins to implement.
Yeah, I think that is the big advantage, is that it's all clicks, not code. The downside is there's a very specific message format, and the receiving system needs to be okay with that format, because you can't go saying, well, you know, we're not going to send it as XML, we're going to send it as JSON. Well, you can't. It's coming as XML. You got to accept it as XML in the exact structure that Salesforce says it has to be. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments on outbound messaging? All right. Well, Terry, over to you for mashups then.
All right. Mashups are kind of a fun one to do, and I tried to put some demos together, and I just didn't quite get enough time to pull it off. So, but mashups by definition, and I grabbed a couple different definitions. One was what I found on Salesforce documentation, where you're taking several data sources and services, combining them or stitching them together. I thought that was a neat term, stitching it together to create something new or to add value in some way. Wikipedia defines it more this way, as a website or a web application that combines content from one or more sources. And really that I think does a nice job of explaining what it does. There are 3 different types of mashups that Salesforce talks about. The first one is the client presentation, and this is one that we probably are most familiar with. This could be where we're displaying a Google map on an account page. It takes very little code typically to put these things together. The integration is pretty lightweight. It does use live data, and it's just embedding the results of that information on your page layout. The other type, and the difference between the client service matchup and the presentation, is that in the service side, we're actually consuming the data. So we're storing information within Salesforce as well. So it's not just presenting it, it's doing something else with it. So it dynamically fetches and consumes data from other systems, a little more complex and sophisticated. So some examples there might be where we are making a web service call to a back-end system for, maybe it's an order entry system, to retrieve shipping tracking information, and we store that number, and we could even call out to say, like in this case, maybe even UPS or US Postal Service, and and say, okay, give me the current status of the shipping. So you're getting into a little bit more involved process typically, and you're saving some of that information within Salesforce. Retrieving so yeah, another example, retrieving, selecting, and storing product shipping cost. So maybe on your opportunity when you're selecting products, maybe you want to get current shipping cost related to that so that you can add it to your quotes or to your opportunity cost. You could do that and store actual real-time information and along with your opportunity. So that's kind of the difference that, as I understood them, between the presentation and the client services types of mashups. And then the third one is an external service matchup, and that's where we're exposing Salesforce data to match it up with another external system. So a good example of that might be an enterprise portal where we're displaying both Salesforce data along with some other pieces of information. I thought another example might be with a BI tool where you've got a nice elaborate, maybe corporate-wide or enterprise-wide dashboard. And not only are you presenting sales information on that, but you may also have other business-related information on that dashboard. So you're grabbing data from multiple sources and presenting that in a mashup. So that would be an external service. The key here is Salesforce is being set up to where you're retrieving information from Salesforce in this example, as opposed to consuming it. Some things to consider when you're using mashups is who controls the API. Is it stable and reliable? So if you are counting on say being able to grab shipping costs to put that on your opportunity, you need to make sure that that site that you're going to is available and is going to work consistently for you. Frequently there are licensing costs. There are a lot of free services, but most of the time your free services have a limited number of calls that are available. Google API is a great example. I've used that with some smaller customers who wanted to resolve city and state address information. And so we will pass a zip code into Google API and have it return city and state. There is a limit to the number of calls that Google will allow you to do without having a fee for that. So you need to be aware of what the limits are. There is almost always going to be some form of a registration requirement. The example that I was trying to put together was using IBM's weather data to display that on an account page. And in the registration process, I was required to give them a credit card information, and I think I typed in my number wrong, which then they said, oh, now you're gonna have to call us to get it registered. So that's why my demo didn't work, because I couldn't get past the registration component. So there is the registration, that's a piece of it as well. And then for your external services, if you're the one exposing data, you want to definitely be aware of how much information and what information you want to let others consume from Salesforce. And then obviously you have to manage your security around that. You don't want anybody just being able to come in and grab confidential information or information that is maybe proprietary. So being careful on that front if you're exposing the data are some of the things to consider. So that's mashups in a real quick few minutes. Any questions or thoughts on that?
As far as like, how do you do the mashup? Is it like an Apex thing, a JavaScript thing, a CSS thing, or does it kind of depend on what you're trying to do?
Yeah, it's I've always done it with code. So yeah, it's Apex and Visualforce are Lightning components now with the So it gets a little bit more complex if you're dealing with Lightning components. But you can also get a lot of these types of things pre-built on AppExchange, especially if you're looking at Lightning components. Like if you wanted to throw weather on an account page, there's a Lightning component, I believe, out there that I saw that you could use. So you wouldn't necessarily have to develop it. There's a lot of free code that's available for some of these as well if you're doing more your traditional type mashups. But yeah, it's typically going to take some level of coding.
Okay. Anybody using mashups in their orgs or have used in another project that you're not with anymore? Nobody's using them. Okay. Oh, Svadka unmuted. She might have something.
I know. I have seen it in the past as well, and I find it almost as interesting as OData and the, sort of trying to bring the information together and play with it and showcase it in a better way, right? So instead of iframes or instead of I forget the term, canvas, right? Mashups are kind of more fun because it's you can make the UI better. Right, it doesn't have to look like an iframe. You can control so many other things. So I think they're fun to play with. I have seen them. I don't have a good demo. I have not seen them recently.
Yeah, things even as simple as if you're in a call center environment and you're doing or an outbound sales environment. And the person you're calling, you want to know, hey, what time zone is that person in based on their address? Well, so you're not calling them at 5 a.m. in the morning or something. That's a good example of where you could use something like this as well.
Very good. Okay, well, Jeff, that segues very nicely into your presentation on Canvas.
Yes, it does. So whereas mashups still kind of deal with, let's say, stuff within Salesforce, there's still Apex, there's still some of the Visual Force, like they were talking about. With Canvas, you already have an app. It's written in PHP, it's written in C#, it's written in C++, Java, Ruby, any other application. You've got that you want to run within Salesforce, but you don't want to just run it because you can have URLs that jump out, display something, jump over to that application and actually run. But let's say while you're running that app, you want to interact with things that are within Salesforce, whether you want to send chatter messages out while you're interacting with that app, whether you want to update records, whether you want to pull information from records and make different decisions. You're actually having something running outside of Salesforce, interacting with Salesforce, and you think you're kind of all within the same platform. To explain what it is, it's basically it's an SDK with an open source set of JavaScript libraries that help you work with the SOAP, REST, or Chatter API in order to get a seamless end user experience inside of Salesforce. So these tools, like I say, are JavaScript APIs that expose external applications within Salesforce. They're lightweight, these JavaScript libraries. They have authentication and communication built within them. When you're talking about authentication, there's either OAuth 2, which we've talked about multiple times here, or a signed request, which is a little more where you build something behind the scenes, then you're able to pass that token back and forth and don't necessarily have to log in all the time as a specific user. It's really intended for UI-based integration rather than back-end data related. So if you're got an app that needs to reach in and grab Salesforce data and continue to work, that still goes through the connected app. That's still the old mechanisms. But if you actually want to take that app and have it run, like I say, within Salesforce, interact back and forth, that's where you do more things with Canvas. So instead of redesigning and let's say rewriting your app, maybe in Apex or whatever else, you just put a front end on it to allow it to work within these HTML within Salesforce. So it's really HTML and JavaScript is what your communication mechanism's going back and forth, and you manage that through a connected app. So to give you a little more picture, because I know that's a lot of words, what's really going on here. So within Salesforce, you have this connected app, which is actually pointing to something that's running out in a server somewhere else. It could be running in Java, it could be running in Heroku through several different means, Ruby, C#, any of those things. And how you expose it is simply through a URL that goes out and grabs that particular information and starts to display it within your app. Now, where the toolkit comes in is in that display, you have built in JavaScript that could be communicating with Salesforce directly through Ajax and using some REST calls to get data. There's an event model. So if you click different things throughout the screen, even things like mouse over or whatever else, you can take those events and send them back to that application. That application can act on those events. Again, this is running outside of Salesforce. So that's part of why you need that connection and the REST calls in to get the Salesforce data, because although you're looking at the screen, you think you're in Salesforce, it's really running somewhere else and is making these calls in order to either retrieve or to store data, either through the database, through the interactions, within the app. And the actual processing of what's going on is in that other server where your app resides. So where can you put these things? It's expanded quite a bit from when this thing first came back in, I think it was 2012, the first time it came out at Dreamforce. You can have them now in chatter feeds, on the chatter tab, consoles, right within your object layouts, your mobile cards. This is mobile compatible. Your mobile navigation, you can hook it up to your telephone system when you're doing your open CTI, publisher, VF pages, and lightning components. All of these can connect to these Canvas apps and utilize the JavaScript tools in order to kind of embed those right within your pages. So when would you consider this? So you have data outside Salesforce and you don't want to bring it in, but you have, let's say, an application that's accessing that data. Let's say you don't have a bunch of Apex developers. We've already kind of talked about that. You're a Java house. You've got a lot of things running in Java. You've got people that can develop an app within Java. You don't necessarily have to go get an Apex developer to come put it into Salesforce. Build it within Java, build it within PHP, and just put in the necessary components within that visual piece to do the connections back and forth within Salesforce. And you've already got an app. It's running well. It's very well used. You don't want to have to go rewrite that just so that you use it within Salesforce. So who uses this is like application integrators. So if you're a partner and you're building systems that, let's say, have custom apps that can integrate into Salesforce, you can build it as one of these things and then just hand it to somebody as a managed package that comes in and installs the connected app, installs the different visual and JavaScript pieces. You really can have this app that you're selling, or free, whatever it happens to be, but it's communicating back and forth with Salesforce, and you can deploy that through managed apps, or again, the application rationalization. So you're a large org, you got many existing apps, and users that want to use those apps within Salesforce, but you don't want to rewrite them to get them all running. So it's again a way to connect those apps into the application. I don't know if I want to read through all these, but they're things people can go back and look, because these are likely things that might show up on a test. When would you I got a news website that lets you do chatter articles. You still want to use a connected app for that. There's no reason to use a Canvas. When you come down a little bit further, down about 4 or 5, so if you've got a custom calendar that appears in Salesforce and it pulls data from other sources, that's probably where you want a Canvas app. So you install that calendar. It has different connections to other places, but you're utilizing it within the application and things are acting upon that. That's probably a good thing for Canvas. Up top where they talked about an email, let's say you have an email system that wants to pull data from multiple different lists, that's probably still use a connected app, because you might hook an Excel to it. You might hook other systems to actually do those emails. So you wouldn't really do Canvas. But down below here, if you've got that mass emailer, but you want to only run it within Salesforce, then again, probably a place where you hook that up with Canvas rather than just a straight connected app. I won't step through a lot of these, because actually the last thing when setting it up. So when you go in and you're setting up your connected app, one of the items you'll see within there is a little checkbox for Canvas. As soon as you click on that, it then opens up the definition of what that is. So that's where you're going to put your URL, how to get that app. You'll define your access method. So whether it's, whether you're doing a post with that signed request, that kind of special way, or whether you're just doing OAuth. You can even hook it up to SAML. And then you define where do you want that app to be available. You might say that these apps are things that are only going to show up within Chatter, where other apps might be able to be on several different places. You know, put it on a Visualforce page, put it on you know, the mobile navigation. You want a Lightning component access, so you can kind of control where you can install that by making that available when you set up the Canvas app. Excuse me. And then down below there are several checkboxes that just kind of help better define those where that app is or how that app is used. Once you've done this connection, there's also a Canvas app previewer, which you can then go to and basically click on any of the apps you've defined. Since it is a URL, you can now go and click on it, and it will preview for you what that app will look like. So you might change a little bit the size that it's going to show up. A lot of that size is determined on which item here, where you place it, whether it's mobile versus chat or whatever else. You'll have different criteria or different parameters around what that thing looks like on the page. The part I won't go into a lot because it's just a lot of you know, in-depth JavaScript pieces, but there are some examples here of, you know, what does JavaScript look like when you're setting up your different actions? Again, those actions go back to the source system, let it know that something happened within Salesforce so it can act differently. How you set up the actual security piece to where you're logging in, setting what your who your user is and what should be run. There's an example there, and then more larger example on how you would do a specific query. So you can set up as a REST connection back into Salesforce. Pretty easy to set up. That's all the code it takes there, I guess, is the bottom line to do it. It's all within JavaScript. So this is not going back to that other server and making the calls over to Salesforce where you might not have connections in, but it's running directly from your browser using a JavaScript tool through Ajax to make that call out. So you might even have access to information on other apps that you wouldn't have if this were running over in the other server, because now you're sitting in your environment within your network. You might be able to even access, you know, some of your apps behind your firewall if you've got that opened up. Finally, there's several different ways, you know, in order to debug and work within this thing. Like I'd mentioned there, because it's running locally on your browser, you may have access to things because you're on your VPN that wouldn't have access to if this app were running somewhere else. There's different tools you can run with your various browsers on how you can debug some of the JavaScript. The messages going back and forth are in a JSON and JavaScript format. And like I say, there's that previewer tool that allows you to look at it once you've added it to see what it kind of looks like. I also included some links to go back and look at some more things. That YouTube item number 2, they've got a couple of very interesting examples there. This was way back in 2012 when they first rolled it out and they were showing it at Dreamforce. But there's some interesting things in there where they hooked up an app that looked at accounts and leads that were being created, then created a little bubbles chart, and they showed how you could subscribe to that. And then basically it was dynamic as accounts and leads were created. It was doing different things on the screen. And they were basically interacting. That was the other thing I didn't mention here, that you could have 2 or 3 of these Canvas apps on the same screen, and through these JavaScript tools, they can be communicating with each other in addition to communicating with the database and Salesforce. But you could have one app sending through the toolkit, sending a event to another app that responds to that event and then sends something back that your first app can respond to. So it's kind of whereas mashups just show the screen different things from different systems, this actually allows you those different systems to interact together on that screen and provide an even more robust UI. Any questions? There's a ton of information out here. Hopefully I didn't fly through this too much, but trying to narrow this down and decide what we'd want to look at and not. There's a lot of stuff here.
I'm still struggling between the difference between Canvas and mashups, because a mashup, you can present data from outside inside Salesforce. In Canvas, you're presenting data from outside Salesforce inside Salesforce. And
it's more than presenting the data, though, because you're actually running an app.
Okay, so that's a big difference.
Yeah, so let's think of one of the examples where they talked about on the mashup, where you call your order system and you pass it an order ID or a tax value, so that they can do that thing. Where this would be is you might hook over to your order system, which will come back into Salesforce and determine what your tax is, and it might actually ask you questions. Is it this kind of order? Is it that kind of order? Is it something else? You answer that, which then does something within the app, which can then go back over into Salesforce and update a parameter on the opportunity to indicate this is this type of order. So it's an interaction between all those versus just exposing the data or exposing the screen. It really is acting live and working back and forth. Could be asking you questions, could be guiding you through. You could actually jump out and it could guide you through a wizard that collected particular information, storing some of that within Salesforce as you go, then ultimately bop you back to an order within Salesforce and say, okay, this has all been created, it's working in the back-end system, now you're ready to go get your approvals. So it's interactive versus just exposing the data is the big difference. Does that help? That
is helpful. I think, Terry, I think you were going to say something too.
I was just going to say a mashup is really more of just a widget. It's very limited typically in what its purpose is, where this is truly an app with a lot of functionality.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I had a customer who had CPQ system that they were not going to transition out of for a couple of years. And so what we were doing is we created opportunities in Salesforce, and then when we get to the pricing, sort of like you add a product, we actually transition to the Canvas app, and we led them through that process to actually create a right product and then update the opportunity with just some information. But that concept of very detailed pricing on a lot of pricing rules based on regions or based on partners and based on lots of different discount rules, that engine was built elsewhere. And they knew it, they used it in the past, and they just weren't ready to transition out. So that system, that application was running on a different server in a different language, but it was surfacing the sort of this concept of a Canvas iframe, right, within Salesforce app. But like Jeff said, you could actually pass information back and forth to it. So that was also very unique to us. And so when we did that's maybe 3 years back, right after Salesforce released Lightning. And so in that case, we still had to scroll back and forth. We didn't have enough real estate in the page itself. Like the Lightning pages didn't have as many layouts as you see it now. So I was really happy to see what Jeff had to show, hey, there is a little mobile cart. Like we couldn't take that Canvas app to mobile at that time. So seeing that Salesforce is investing and, hey, you can use it in a couple different ways actually makes me happy. Because I know that we could go back now to this customer and say, now you should be able to actually have your people on the road with mobile if we can actually configure this Canvas app for like mobile carts and whatnot. So
yeah, when this first came out, it only showed stuff on the Chatter feed.
Yep.
That was the only place you could connect stuff. So they've added all this stuff since then, recognizing that you want these things to run a lot more than just on the Chatter feed.
Yeah.
Awesome. The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know about Salesforce.
Exactly.
I go to have 80 hours a week to be able to devote to playing with this stuff, but we learn what we can. Thank you, Jeff. Any closing thoughts on Canvas from anybody? All right, Varuna, you are up with sequence diagrams.
Let me share. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So sequence diagrams. So this is part of the governance of a project. Whenever you have integration, it's always good to put a sequence diagram together of your interfaces. So there's a link on the reading list to this particular document, which has given a lot of examples on how you could use a sequence diagram. But the goal of this is to give a visual representation of what you're going to do and how we're going to have the flow in terms of sequence. So when you're drawing these kind of diagrams, you can use either a PowerPoint or even if you use Visio, they have a template. And so there are a lot of tools you can use to draw these pictures. And so there are main sort of few concepts. One is the lifeline. This arrow, the dotted line, which shows that the life. It represents the lifespan of the this particular object, and this box, which is called the activation box, is where you're going to show when a transaction comes. If it's going to hit that particular, say, the interface, you have to show in a box. So I'll show an example. This is a drawing which I did for in the current project. So when you have a diagram like this, it's very clear, what the sequence you're going to follow for the particular interface. And if you have, for example, a failure, if you want to decide who's going to do the retries, it's very clear who's going to do that. So it's always good to put this sequence diagram in place, even if it's a simple interface. So for example, in this one, along with the transaction name, we put together the main key attributes that we are going to send through. And if it's on the reply, you can see what's going to come back. So on this particular diagram, we put the request in one color and the response coming back in a different color, just to make it clear. And so these are the different, I would say, stakeholders or the different systems which are in place. And this diagram would show how a transaction would come from end to end. So even I think when you're doing scoping, it's good to put a sequence diagram together. So it really tells you how complex and how many systems you have to touch. Though on a high level, it will be just a request and response. But when you go into details, there could be many systems that you would touch, including middleware or a transformation engine or a API in between. So it's good to put this kind of a diagram together for any interface. Any questions? So I don't have much stuff, but a lot of details on this in this document, which is published in the reading list. I didn't go through all the details, but it's kind of summarized all the concepts, and I've given an example that we used in one of the projects that I'm using right now.
So when the line is dashed on the diagram, that means that that system at that point in time isn't doing anything. It's just kind of hanging out there. But then when there's a box, it means that system's actively engaged in something. Is that how they work?
No, so in this, for example, if you go here, so in here, so when you're starting something, it has a dotted line.
Okay.
But in for this example, right? So in this section, it is a dotted line because for this request, it's not doing anything. So whenever it hits and if it's doing a processing, then you would put a box.
Okay.
So you would not, rather than putting the entire thing as a box, you would. So it's very easy to figure out who's they're doing some kind of a processing. It could be just a pass through, but at least it's clear that there's some kind of processing going on. In this section, it's just then they're not involved with this particular interface.
Okay. So then my question is, if there's processing happening, you've got the box. Why isn't there a box like on the student? Because like the student is making these call outs and it's getting data back. I guess I would have expected that to be a box too.
Correct. So I think in this example, they didn't put the entire process. They put it like they took a subset of the this flow as an example. But it would, in reality, if they're doing something, they would have a box like this.
Okay. Questions, comments from anybody? Okay, moving on. Terry and Nicole, we've got your demos next. It's the danger of mentioning a cool tool on a call is I ask you to demo it.
So a tool that I use quite a bit for any type of for data loading or data manipulation is Excel Connector. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So really what it does is it creates a new ribbon inside of Excel. If you're an Excel geek, like I typically, I guess I'm referred to as, it's kind of nice because I live and breathe in the environment that I'm already really comfortable with. And so it's nice in that I get a toolbar up here at the top. I can log into my Salesforce org just simply by doing the login, and you can see I'm connected here already. and once I do that, then I can come up and get data from my Salesforce org. So if I wanted to query information, say from an account, I can select the account object and grab a few fields from the account. So we'll say maybe the ID. We'll grab the, let's just grab city, state, and country just for fun. I can also throw a where clause on here if I want to. If you're really familiar with SQL, you can just type it into the box where you see the SQL statement.
SQL or SOQL?
SQL, sorry.
Okay. I got excited there for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody
SQL.
figured out a workaround.
No, it is SQL. And so if I wanted to add, say, the account type field, I could add that as well. I've got several options. It's auto-generating my query, which you see here. I'm going to create this in a new worksheet. So you'll see a new worksheet pop up down here when I retrieve it. It's going to grab the headers for me. And in this case, I'm going to have it enforce pick list values for me as well. So I'll just execute this. And it grab no data. So my query was obviously not very good. Let's try that without the, oh yeah, country. Let's go with state. I don't think Iowa is a country last I checked.
Yeah, I don't think they've been.
Yeah, we've not.
I don't think they want to secede or anything.
Yeah, we'll leave that to California. All right, so it brings my data straight down into Salesforce, where now I can take and manipulate it and do whatever I want. So if I wanted to add something like, let me move that out of the way where I can see what I'm doing. United States as my country. I can add that, copy that down to everything. And then once I'm ready to make my changes or save my changes back to Salesforce, I simply can go in here and either update the selected or update all records. And it selects my account, brings in my mapping information right there, and I can say okay. And updated 20 records, and it will give me my results here as well.
Oh,
so
sweet.
if I was doing an insert, so if I receive data from somebody, what I really like is the fact that I did this without saving it, so I don't have to deal with any CSV files at all. But if I were inserting data, it's the exact same process. I just come in and select what I want, hit insert selected. And in this case, my operations would come back with either record inserted, or if it failed, it would tell me what caused it to fail. That then gives me my IDs for the inserted record. And then if you're comfortable with things like VLOOKUPs, it makes the ability to do all of that data manipulation super, super nice and easy. If you've got reports that are built out in Salesforce, and I'm not sure what I have here, but you can actually bring in data directly from a report. And I'm not sure if I've got any reports that are going to have anything. So at least in this org, we'll try it. I can run that report, and it's basically doing the same type of thing as my SQL statement was. It's just running the report and then going to pull that data down into Excel. Again, I can then take and manipulate it and do whatever it is that I want to do with it. And this might not have been a good idea to do live. So I'm not sure.
Maybe we wanted the state to set the code on that one too.
Yeah. So there's that. It does also let you merge records. So if you've got the need to merge a lot of information, there is a certain way that you've got to configure the data inside Excel to do a merge. If you've got IDs that are just your 15-character IDs and you want to convert those to the 18-digit IDs, you've got the nice little conversion thing here as well.
Oh,
that will automatically resolve that for you. And so there's a variety of different features. You can convert your leads. You can open.
What's that Salesforce ID lookup one?
I am not. That's one that I don't use. So let me see if we can see. Lets you look up a record ID based on a filter you define. To look up multiple IDs at once, at least one ID map needs to be defined in the template. Yeah, it's not one that I've used, so I'm not as familiar with that particular feature.
Okay.
Kind of reminds me what demand tools have. Demand tools has sort of a feature where you are trying to figure out if records exist. So you run it against Salesforce and it returns IDs back, of, based on certain criteria. I'm thinking that's what it is because it looks similar to the demand tools.
Yeah. You've got things even as things like converting a page layout into Visualforce. So if you need to recreate an account page layout and just modify a few little things, and even creating a editable Visualforce page off of an existing page layout, it will do that for you as well. So just some neat little tricks. Cool tools that just make things really nice and simple. I'm using it mostly. I'm probably in it almost daily, manipulating data or updating information for clients. You are in Excel, so if you're dealing with millions and millions of records, it's obviously not necessarily the tool you want to use, because Excel is not going to handle that size of data. The tool would, but Excel won't. So you got to be somewhat smart in how you use it, but. They do offer, I think, a 30-day free trial for the product. They have a free version that lets you query information, but I believe its limitation is you can't do updates or insert with the free version. So nice product, super simple to use, and it really is at a nice price point for almost any organization.
I can see where this could be useful instead of having to go into data loader, okay, click, bring up the file I need, look at the success files. That brings up a question. If when a record fails, how does it indicate that? Does it create like an error column?
Yeah, you'll have a success is I think what this column would be called. And so or actually not this one, but yeah, you'll have the error message will be listed here as well.
Right. That operation field will have what your error is.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So rather than okay, it'll actually be red, and it will show you what your error is.
So can you just throw some random, or are you in a live org right now? I don't want to mess up your production data.
So like here, here's your pick list for these. So that's all going in to Excel. Let's see. Can I?
I'm just thinking, can you just create a new account record and show us how it would insert, and then create one that would have an error in it and would fail?
Let me just do this. Let's take this record. And an account name is required. So if I go to insert this one, I should get an error back. Okay, we don't have an ID.
And can you save these mappings for future use?
Yeah, it will keep that mapping for you.
Okay, cool. Aha, okay.
I get one error. And then right there's our error message.
Nice. And there's no ID, so that would also tell you that it didn't go in. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so a lot of times I'll have multiple tabs are open where I'm doing VLOOKUPs between accounts and contacts or user IDs, and just a number of different things that and to not have to deal with CSV files is like God's greatest gift.
Well, one other thing that wasn't clear when you did your initial get data is it also gives you a relationship, so you can dive down 3 or 4 levels and pull all that data back into one pull versus going and trying to set up a report type and do all that stuff. It's not, you can write your SOCL just directly, or over on the left-hand side.
Yeah,
if you've got a relationship, it'll show it. You can open it up and see the fields and open up another one and pull objects from various different children, even grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
Oh, pretty cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
I want to say I think their tool's like $300 to $350, something like that. It's super cheap, and just really a nice.
That's a year, so
yeah, that's annually.
And Terry, have you used the convert leads feature?
I think I have used it once, for one of my clients who wanted to get rid of using leads and go straight to accounts and contacts. And so, yeah, I did do a mass convert. I believe all you do is you bring down all of your lead records and highlight them and just say convert them.
Okay. So it'll create the opportunity contacts and the accounts?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
This would have been so useful to me today. I was doing a data import for a client, and some records failed because of invalid email addresses, and they were stupid typos, like, you know, there was spaces in the email. So I could have corrected it right in that spreadsheet, selected those rows, hit insert, and it would have inserted those corrected records instead of having to bring up the error file, tell it to use the error file for the import.
I don't remember the last time that I loaded up Data Loader. I probably haven't used it in 2 or 3 years once I found this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got one client who I have to use their computer, and so I don't have this tool, and so I'm using Data Loader, and I just hate it.
You swear at it every time you pull it up.
I do. It's like, dang it. I've told them many times they should buy this tool.
You use it across multiple orgs, or is it for each org it's a license?
Yeah. So if I sign out here, you can see I've got a variety of different orgs or clients that I've used it with. So yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, they don't care the connections. You're buying the tool.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the demo of that one.
Wow, thank you.
Absolutely.
Nicole, we left you a whopping 10 minutes for demand tools. Think you can do it, or should we push it next week?
Well, honestly, I can't show. Oh, yeah, I am unmuted. I honestly can't show too much because I am going to be doing this in a sandbox environment from an actual org. So some of the data is junk data. So I'm going to leave out like some identifiers and stuff like that. But what I tried to do was I tried to create a trial account from a developer org, and it is like immediately rejecting me. So I would have to contact Demand Tools to get a free trial, and it's only for 5 days. And I just was going to do it to demo this with you guys, but I can demo with the sandbox environment with some, junk data in it.
Right. So with some pure data in it.
Yeah, and there is some real data, but what I do is I would just make sure I don't put any names in there or anything like that.
Yeah,
that'd be great. Okay, I can show it now. So go ahead and I can present. So, all right. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen, and it should be Demand Tools, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the difference with Demand Tools is it is org specific. So you can't, as a consultant, you can't use it across multiple orgs. You do have to have each client or sign up for it. So this is a great tool if you work with nonprofit clients because it is free for nonprofits. It's not that expensive if it's a small or medium business. And since it gets a little bit pricier when you're working with an enterprise client. So when I worked for an enterprise company, I think our licenses were $2,500 per user per year. I mean, it's pricey and you had to pay per license. But I think if you have under 60, it is it's everybody's included. Everybody has the tools. So I like it when I'm working with small and medium business clients where you don't have an admin who can take the time to sit here and do all this data cleanup. They can get a lot of bang for their buck out of this. So there's a couple of different modules. The one that I use the most is the single table dedupe. But there's mass impact, mass effect, power grid, reassign ownership, mass backup, bulk backup, report edit. And then this is what Spotka was talking about with the find report IDs, which I have never actually used that tool. So I'm just going to jump into the one that I use the most, and I'll probably hop into a couple other ones if that's okay with you guys. So the single table dedupe is what I use more often than not. So you can use this for any standard or custom object. And I'm just going to start with accounts. I'm going to say use object. And you can see that there are a bunch of different scenarios here. They give you some by default, and then you can see that there's some that I've created for particular clients. So I'm just going to use this accounts billing loose criteria. And you can see here that there's a general description. So as you save your scenarios, you can change your description so it can kind of help you remember what scenario you're using. So I'm going to, oops, hold on. Sorry. We're going to double click that one. Okay, so you can see here that it goes ahead and it selects some fields for you. And then if you have anything that is a lookup or a master detail, you can click into those and grab additional fields if you needed to. So I don't even know what this field is, and I work for this org. So you can click anything here as well to grab some additional details. But I'm actually going to remove the account name and the owner name so that we don't have anything there. And I cannot, I do know who principal is, and that's not going to make sense in this org. So I can go up here and just grab, let's grab, deceased is great, right? I don't know. Foreign, and we'll grab our account ID. So we'll go ahead, and the other thing that we can do is we can add a certain condition. So if we only wanted to check duplicates that were owned by a particular owner, or if we only wanted to check duplicates that existed within a certain state. The biggest one that we did is this is actually the org in which we had like 5 billion assets. And we ended up using assets to track membership subscriptions. So like different entities that they were a member of. And unfortunately, these came from a bunch of different sites, and some of them have member numbers and some of them didn't. And the previous system did not dedupe any of this. So there was a lot of replication. And after we loaded this all into Salesforce, we started looking at it, demand tools, we started realizing a ton of duplicates. So to downsize the effort involved in doing some of that deduping, we actually filtered our assets by our membership types so that we could easily focus on just those that were the same. So I'm just going to say use all for right now because this is a partial copy, so there's not a lot here. In your fields to map or fields to match, you can select which fields you want to add as a mapping condition, and then it has some different matching types here. So there's some standards like cleaned account name, which removes all that LLC, Inc., the things like that. You could do a country match. You can do a first letters. I've used this a lot to kind of catch some oddballs or first words. You can also do a relaxed address match, a relaxed domain match. You can do a Salesforce ID match, a state match, street address match, things like that. So, or in zip code 5 and 9, that helps. You also have the option here to say if you want to match on blank values. So maybe I want the name to match, but it's okay. Like I also want it to see if there are 2 that have no billing street or no billing city. This works a lot like duplicate management rules, and that a blank value does not match to a non-blank value. So if you want to see that, you actually need to remove the mapping condition altogether if you wanted to find a contact that had a street address versus the same contact that doesn't have that street address. So that's just something to keep in mind. You also have the option here to say whether it's fuzzy, transpose, or alpha clean. And then you can edit nickname lists. So you can see here that they load some by default. So Al is short for Albert, Aggie for Agatha. So these are just ones that come in here. But if you have ones that come up pretty often, you can add those. And then there's an account cleaning list. So you can see that for the cleaned account name, it removed, ampersand, or it replaces ampersand, saint. For suffixes, it removes co, company, incorporated, limited, and then for prefix, the, and department of. So if you needed to add or replace anything here, something that's super common, especially if you're working within a certain industry, you can do that very easily. Adding a mapping condition is really easy. I can go in here and I can say, show me those where my state is, I'm going to say state match, so that way if it is, you know, Kentucky abbreviated versus Kentucky spelled out, you see that. Okay. And I'm also going to just say match blank as well. Okay, so then we're going to go into our merge control. Cool, it shows me the same 4 that I got earlier. So you can see here that we have 2 accounts. They each have a duplicate key, which is generated, so you can kind of see what the groupings are. And then you have the fields that you've selected. If you want to add more fields, it's really easy to do. And you can also, let's back up, sorry. You can apply a master rule to determine if there's a duplicate, which one should survive the merge. So I have like this particular master rule, which it says which one has the most opportunities and the most contacts. So I'm just going to apply this master rule to all. And of course, none of them do. So let's do newest record. That's got to do something, right? There we go. So you'll see here that this went ahead and picked based on the master rule which one is green and which one is red, which means the green one is going to be the one that survives, and then the red one will not. There are a couple other things that you can do here. So you can change this and force this as the master account. You also have the option to to modify this and update the record in Salesforce. So if you saw something here and you're like, actually, I really want this phone number to survive, but this one's going to be my winner, you can move that over and update your value. So there's a couple things there. You also have the option to say which fields you want to update if the master is empty, as well as if you want to combine field values. So an option for combining field values is if you have like a multi-select pick list, or if you have a text area like a description and you want to merge those descriptions together, you could do that. You can select your batch size. You can say whether or not you want to delete your non-master records or if you want to mark them for delete. When I worked for my enterprise company, we always marked them as delete, and I promise you they never got deleted, so it was very frustrating. It just continued to still take up space. So I always recommend going ahead and purging your records. And I just realized it's 9:01 because my clock is down on the right. So I can pick this back up later, but there's a couple different modules. Yeah, sorry. You want to take over, Natalya? Or
yeah, thanks. I didn't realize it could do so much. That's a very comprehensive tool. So yeah, we are out of time, and my commitment to you guys is to end on time. So we will take the discussion into Slack on what you guys want to do next week. There's no assigned study topics, but we could do things like present some case studies on which integration would work best in a given scenario, do some more show and tell of if you've actually tried some of these different integration things. So think about it. Let's chat in the Slack channel about it. And as of now, we'll plan on holding the meeting next week, and we'll kind of figure out what to do with it throughout the week. The recording is stopped.